彼が見えない、聞こえない。
A couple of months ago, I made a video on the quietest keyboard switches that I've ever heard. Specifically, I'm talking about the Phoenixes from Gamakay. They also sent me the Bumblebees and the Clears, but these were definitely the most silent. I was really impressed by them, and apparently so were you guys, given the insane amount of love you gave that video. Now, these are linear switches, so not everyone likes this. Sometimes you need a little bit of pep in that step, a little bit of spring in the thing, or some tactility in the facility. Gamakay reached out and they just released the Griffin and the Pegasus switches that I have right here. Let's talk about them on your boot sequence. Now, before we talk about switches, let's talk about why. Why would you want a tactile bump on your switch? Well, it's actually pretty simple, and in my opinion, there's two reasons. The first one, feedback. As you're typing, you can feel your fingers go through sort of something, past that bumpy threshold, and some people find that satisfying. If you're coming from a membrane keyboard, a tactile switch might actually feel more familiar since the resistance of the actual switch kind of mimics the resistance of a membrane dome. The difference is that on a mechanical switch, you actually go past that resistance before actually bottoming out. Kind of like that diagram here. You push harder and harder, and then you're right through the tactile event, and then right before the actuator rides on the body of the stem and bottoms out, you got your actual actuation point. So just like a membrane keyboard, the actuation happens after the tactile event. The second reason might be a little bit of a personal one, but I keep my left hand over my keyboard most of the time. And sometimes, I just lean forward a little bit and press the spacebar or any other keys by mistake. Tactile switches usually have a higher actuation force, which helps resist unwanted key presses better. All right, so let's talk about those two. First of all, they're both in the silent category, and both of them have a tactile bump. They're also all pre-lubed, which is a nice addition. They are 3-pin, so keep that in mind if you're planning on installing them on a 5-pin keyboard, and they have an opening at the top to let the RGB shine through without actually discoloring it. You can see that the Pegasus switches have a blue tint on the upper housing, while the Griffins have a brown tint. Now, in my last video about the Phoenix, Bumblebee, and Crystals, I mentioned the bracket design and how the Phoenix ones were actually my favorite out of the three because they were the most stable ones. Like, it was rock solid compared to any other switches, and a little bit more solid than the Bumblebee and Crystal switches. And it was because the brackets actually have a kind of railing on the Phoenix one specifically. It looks like Gamakay actually paid attention because both of their new switches have that same rail design. Nice. Now, before we get to the specs of these switches, you're probably waiting for a sound test. So let's get that out of the way right now with a single key sound test on a glorious keyboard. Now, before we talk about the sound, you guys were pretty vocal about wanting me to fill up a keyboard with the switches that I test, so that's what I did with the Griffin, Pegasus, and the Phoenix as a comparison. So what did you guys think? Personally, I prefer the Pegasus switches over all of them, and there's really one reason. They're just slightly more silent than the Griffin ones. I would have to guess that the reason why is just because the Griffins are slightly shorter everywhere. So you bottom out harder on the Griffin compared to the Pegasus. The Pegasus have a total travel of 3.3 mil, while the Griffin ones have 3.2. If we look at the actuation point, the Pegasus are at 2 mil, while the Griffins are at 1.8 millimeters. Couple that with the pretty heavy 65 grams of force required to push either switches through the threshold, and boom, one is slightly louder. Also, they told me that the Griffin switches were a two-stage design. It'll give you some rebound feeling. That's in their words. And I agree, you kind of feel it, but I prefer the smoothness of the single bump on the Pegasus still. It's still my winner by far. Once again though, both switches are super quiet, which is definitely nice in an office setting or if you like to game at night. Heck, because my bedroom is across my office at home and we don't really close the doors to let the dogs, roam around the house. At night, when I work, I sometimes get told to type quieter by my girlfriend. Thankfully, the Phoenix switches, so these right here, fixed that issue last year, but I'm willing to try out a little bit of tactility with the Pegasus. I think I also might just yoink the keyboard that came with those, this one right here, because the body of a keyboard makes a huge difference in the sound. Take a listen. Price-wise, they're currently on promo for $14 a box. There's 35 switches in one box, so if you want enough for a 60 or 65% keyboard, you're gonna need 2 packs, and for anything bigger like TKL or 100%, you're gonna need 3 packs at least. It's a pretty good price in my opinion. So yeah, I didn't think I'd switch off of the Phoenix anytime soon, but I think I'm gonna go with the Pegasus switches, and I'll let you guys know if I end up having buff finger syndrome, because these are 65 grams, whereas these are 45. In any case, that was pretty much it for today's video. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Don't forget to leave a like if you liked it, a comment if you want to talk about the switches. By the way, the keyboard that I showed, they didn't want me to talk about it specifically, but it's their TK75 from Gamakay. So yeah, this is the one that I showed that was super silent. That is their keyboard. It's a pretty good looking one. Anyways, it's right here to see the latest video, right here to subscribe to the channel. Stay frosty, my dudes, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.